Okay, so continuing on from the previous lesson where we had just looked at this concept of parent-child relationships on the object level and the bone level, we're going to take a look at two additional options that again have to do with parent-child relationships. So the first thing that I want to explain to you here is what's going on in the outliner. Go ahead and click on the armature first and switch this to object mode. Now notice that when we want to create parent-child relationships in the outliner, we can simply click on the figure over here and move our mouse right here on the icon and press the left mouse button down and drag it onto the armature. We get the options for the set parent too. Now the other way you can do this is you can simply click on the figure in the outliner, press the shift key down and then click on the armature. Notice that the figure over here has an orange circle and the last object, which is the active object that we selected, which is the armature, is showing up with white text and the circle is a little bit yellow over here. Now in order to create parent-child relationships using this technique, you have to move your mouse inside the 3D view and then do Control P. And you're going to get the set parent to menu again. Move your mouse away from this. Now if you want to exclusively do this inside the 3D view, you will click on the figure first, press the shift key down and then click on the armature. But if at any time you find it difficult to do this inside the 3D view, just do it the way I've shown it to you, where you can simply select on the figure in the outliner, press the shift key down and then click on the armature. Anyways, go ahead and move your mouse over here. Having these two selected in this order, do Control P. Notice that when we get this menu, we get two additional options. We get Object Keep a Transform and a Bone Relative. Now you've already seen that whenever it's talking about creating parent-child relationships between objects, this is at the object level. When it's talking about bones, this is at the bone level. So when we made the eye, the child of the eye bone, we were working at the bone level. When we were making the figure, the child of the armature, we were working at the object level. Okay? Now, in order to understand these two options, we're going to have to do this in a new file. It's difficult to understand it using this figure over here. Go under File, do New, and just do Reload Startup File. Click on this camera, press the Shift key down, click on the left, X, and just delete. Press the 1 key to go to the front view and press the 5 key to go to ortho view. Just zoom in a bit and then do Shift C to make sure that the 3D cursor is in the center of the 3D grid and just zoom out. Go ahead and click on this cube over here and click on the red arrow and move it to the left and click on the blue arrow and move it up. Now if you open up the transform menu over here, notice that we've changed the location of this object from its starting point, which is the center of the 3D grid. So if you click on this object, press Alt G, it's going to reset the location. Okay, so if you press the G key to move, press the R key to rotate, press the S key to scale, you'll notice that we've changed the location, rotation, and scale of this object from its starting location, which was at the center of the 3D grid. So when we do Alt R G S, that's what it's doing. It's resetting these numbers. So go ahead and click on this red arrow and move it back. Remember, these are the numbers right now that are showing that this is the location that you've decided to put this object here. What it's really talking about, this location, is this origin point over here of this cube. Okay, now do Shift D to duplicate and place this here. Okay, so if you click over here, notice that the numbers are of course going to be different. Okay, now we need to place the 3D cursor back in the center. Do Shift C to just place it back. Do Shift A. Now add an armature with a single bone. Okay, Now go ahead and switch to edit mode over here. Click on the tail of this bone and click on the blue arrow to make it a little bigger. Click on the body of this bone and move it up. Do Shift D and position this over here, meaning we duplicated the bone. Now go to pose mode. So this is one bone and this is another bone over here. Okay. Now you've already seen that when we click on an object and we want this object to be the child of a single bone, we have to make sure that when we are in the armature, we switch to pose mode. Now when we click on this object, press the shift key down and click on this bone, and then when we do Control P, here you can click on bone. This is what we had originally done when we were creating the eye as the child of this bone. Now, having this bone selected, press the R key to rotate. Now click on this object. Notice that the numbers are not changing. This is because the child is going to always show its original starting position. So when you click on this object and go to the its object tab and remove the parent by clicking X, it's going to snap back to its original starting location. Okay? Go ahead and click on this bone, do Alt R to reset the rotation. So we're going to click on this object, press the shift key down and click on this bone, do Control P and click on bone again. So now you already know that when you click on the parent and press the R key to rotate, the child will follow. When you press the S key, the child will scale. When you press the G key, the child will move. Right? So this object will always follow whatever the bone is doing, which is its parent. Now do Alt R G S to reset this bone. Now notice that when we have this bone selected and when we switch to edit mode, if we click on the tail of this bone and do the same thing, press the R key to rotate and click on the body, press the G key to move, press the S key to scale, the child right now is not changing. But as soon as you switch to pose mode, the child will change, right? Because it's always going to keep that relationship between its parent. Meaning that in edit mode, whatever you do to this bone and switch to pose mode, the child will also always keep its relationship a distance from its parent. So if you click on edit mode and just move this up a little bit, notice that when we click on pose mode, the child moves. Okay? So now when we click on this object and press the shift key down and click on this one, and I'm just going to click it again to make sure that this bone is selected. Control P. Now when you do bone relative, notice where this line is going. Right? So this object's relationship line is going directly to the tail of this bone. And this object's relationship line is going directly to the origin of the actual armature object. Meaning if you go to object mode, that's where it's going. Okay? So go ahead and click on pose mode over here. Now when you click on this bone and press the R key, you'll notice that the parent-child relationship still works. We can rotate, scale, and press the G key to move. And when you click on this object, go to its object tab, you can see that the parent is the armature, bone, and bone. And if you click on this one, it's going armature, bone, and bone, right? So their parents are these individual bones. Now the difference here is that if you click on this bone and just do Alt RGS first to reset it, now when you go to edit mode and click on the tail of this bone, press the G key to move it, click on the body to scale it, press the G key over here. Now notice that when you switch to pose mode, the child will not change its position. Okay, so this is the difference. So when you click on the bone and press the R key, the parent-child relationship still works, but here we get to position the bone anywhere that we want, and it will not affect the child. But in the other case, if we change the position of the bone in edit mode and switch to pose mode, the position of the child will change. Now, how is this even working? Because is there some kind of a special option for this? So if you click on the bone and go to the bone tab and scroll down over here, you can see that under relationships, it has this checkbox called relative parent. Now, if you click on this bone, you can see that it's checked. So when we had clicked on this bone, press the shift key down and clicked on this one. And when we did Control P, did bone relative, that's all that occurred. When you click on this bone, you can see that it just checked the box, relative parent. So that's basically the difference here. Now remember, in both cases, that when we click on this bone, press the R key to rotate, click on this bone, press the R key to rotate. When you click on this object and remove the armature, it'll go back to its original starting position. When you click on this and click X, it's going to go back to its original starting position. So now this helps us to understand the next concept, which is object keep transform. How does that work? Now, we're not going to use the armature for this because that's obviously going to work on the object level. So you can use the armature if you want, but it really doesn't matter over here. So I'm just going to click on the armature and delete it, meaning that this is the object level, right? X and just delete it. It'll be easier to understand it with another object. Just do Shift C to make sure that the 3D cursor is inside the 3D view. Now do Shift A and go ahead and just add a UV sphere. Notice that this again is on object mode, meaning that it's on the object level. Press the G key to move this over here. Notice that the location for this child is changing, right? We already just understood this on this, okay? Now when you click on this sphere, meaning that we want this to be the child of this object, press the Shift key down and click on this one. When you do Control P, over here you'll see that the options are basically the same here. Object and object keep transform. Don't worry about vertex and vertex triangle. Let's take a look at this. When you click on object, you'll notice that the relationship line is being created, meaning that when you click on the parent and press the R key to rotate, the child will follow. Press the S key to scale the parent, the child will scale, and press the G key to move, the child will move. Okay, now go ahead and click on this child and press the G key to move it. Notice that the location is changing over here. Now when you have this child selected and you remove this cube over here, notice that when you are moving the child, you're actually moving its location over here. Go ahead and click this, press the Shift key down, click over here, do Control P, and click on Object. Now, when we click on this object, press the G key to move it. Notice that the location is not going to change because this object knows about its original starting location. So when you have this object selected, go over here and exit. It's just going to go back to the way it was. Okay. Now I'm going to Control Z to undo this. Go ahead and click over here, press the G key to move this, and press the R key 2 times and just rotate it something like this, and press the S key. Okay. Now notice what happens when we click on this object, press the Shift key down and click on this object. Basically, we're going to switch its parent. Do Control P, and when you click on object, notice what happens to the child. It's basically going to create the parent-child relationships again, or Blender is, by simply resetting the child object with its original location. Okay, now do Control Z to undo this. Now, clicking on the sphere, pressing the Shift key down, clicking on this one. When you do Control P over here, and when you state object keep transform, what Blender is going to do is actually apply the transforms of the child that it got from the movement of its parent. So when you click it, notice that over here, the child did not reset itself, right? It just simply switched its parent. But now when we click on the child and exit, guess what's going to happen? The child will not move. So that's what that option does. It simply applies the position, basically the location, rotation, and scale that whatever this object got from its parent then creates the parent-child relationship. Okay? So now, if we X and delete this sphere, press Shift A and add the armature, you can see that it's really just talking about the armature at the object level over here, right? So if you click on this object, press the Shift key down and click on the armature, when you do Control P, here you can see that you're getting the same concept. It's talking about on the object level. So here we can simply click on object. Okay, now the cube is the child of the armature. So obviously we're not going to, this wouldn't make any sense, right? You would have to do this in pose mode, but if you're in object mode, press the R key to rotate, scale this, it's the same thing. Now when you click on this cube, press the Shift key down, click over here, do Control P. When you do this, it's just going to apply the transform on the cube and set it as set the new parent up. Okay, so this is why we had to look at it this way. It's difficult to understand when you're dealing with armature because you're not going to be rotating the armature like this in object mode, right? You're only going to be rotating the bones in pose mode. Anyways, that's what that was. Now go ahead and go back to your original file. Now what I want you to see over here, one other thing is that if you click on the figure and drag it onto the armature and do with automatic weights and move this up, notice that on the object tab, when you click on have the figure selected, over here you have another option called armature. Basically this is just like the armature modifier and it exclusively works with vertex groups. So if you click on this and go to the modifiers tab over here, click on this bone, make sure in pose mode, when you press the R key to rotate, you'll see that it's actually moving faster than wherever the bone is moving. This is because two armature modifiers are working, the internal one and this external one. Okay, so in order for this concept to work, you actually have to apply the mirror modifier, remove this armature modifier. And if you click over here, you can notice that now we're just using the internal armature modifier. It doesn't really give us any options to click on like it was when we had the armature modifier. Okay, so this means that it'll still work. So now when you click on this, press the R key, you can see that it's just an internal armature modifier. Okay, now the reason I showed this to you is because again this has to do with this concept of parent-child relationships. That's all this is. But we're, of course, we are not going to be using this concept. We're just going to keep it on object over here. And of course, we're just going to use the armature deform modifier over here. Anyways, let's go ahead and just reload this file. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.